So lots of nonprofit managers and directors that I work with often tense up and freak out when conflict shows up in meetings, whether it's conflict, disagreement, a difference of opinion, a change in plan, some kind of disruption. I think a lot of people think that if you have conflict in meetings, it makes it a shit meeting. People think that the meeting has gone downhill. But I want to tell you why that's not the case. So that when it shows up in your meetings, you can have a little bit of a different orientation. Hi, my name is Petra Vega. I am an anti-oppressive leadership coach who helps marginalized nonprofit leaders speak up in crucial moments in meetings. In crucial moments in meetings, even when self-doubt may be getting in the way. Okay, audio is good. Thank you. Today, I want to share with you a few examples from very small to very big around how conflict can really be an opportunity for us to deepen relationships in our workplaces, to really further the mission and the vision of the work that we're doing at our nonprofits, and as a way for us to practice how we deliver our message in a way that others can be open to listening to, that calls people to move closer to us in our vision and the work that we're trying to materialize in the world. If you want to get started on this, I highly encourage you to check the description box below for the Nonprofit Disruptor Survival Toolkit. This is where I collected 5 tips so that you can be able to speak up without all the second guessing, all the kind of mind garbage that we can have, so that you can finally get your liberatory ideas heard and implemented. Again, in the description box below, I highly encourage you to get that as you're watching. So the first example I want to share with you is an organization-wide conflict, right? Because sometimes the scales of conflict can be really different. So I want to start with the biggest scale conflict that I have experienced. There was an organization I was working at where it was up for debate for us to change the criteria for the kind of people we were serving. You all know that nonprofits may change that every so often, and who you serve is really fucking important. And so that I knew immediately that was like, well, that's a big deal. And the criteria that wanted to be changed was, it came out that if we change the criteria in the ways that like national leadership wanted to happen, that would directly impact our immigrant and undocumented members negatively. And so the conflict here, I want to be clear, is that this national leadership team, right, folks at the very tippy top, wanted to change the criteria because they wanted for us to demonstrate that we had higher success metrics, and they've had the experience, or they said that they had some data that said, as long as we serve this particular population, which if you are alive in 2026, that wouldn't even be a question right now, but this was something that happened many, many years ago. But there was an idea that if we were to change the metrics, which would, again, unintentionally be able to restrict the amount of undocumented and immigrant members that we served, but would make our numbers look better, that was what the conflict was. And so that is like the decision that was happening. And the conflict in terms of our organization was that we had this equity value. A lot of nonprofits have an equity value, and that'll really make no sense with some of the decision making that was trying to happen here. And so, I immediately was like, this seems a little janky. I don't really like that. And so, for my regional staff in the New York team, this is something that we had discussed, and we decided to fight data with data, right? I fucking love data. And so we were able to gather all the data around the members that we knew would be inadvertently negatively impacted by a criteria change. And we were able to demonstrate that actually our numbers look so fucking good because we serve this like extremely excluded, oppressed community of people. And so we were able to, that's what we did in our regional team. And then we communicated some of our sharings and findings with the other regions so that we could be able to come to the table to the national team around like, okay, here's some data that we have. Let's battle out data to data. And so in the end of that, and that takes some effort, and that takes some diligence, and that takes some like courage and risk, right, as an organization. And then in the end, we were able to win that, right? And so the criteria did not change. And it really gave us a clear sense of like, oh, what the fuck do we mean when we talk about equity as a value in practice, right? And so that is an organization-wide conflict that with a lot of elbow grease and relationships and communication and data, we were able to shift the course of where that organization was going, right? And in terms of who it is that we were serving, because all of us had, we knew the kind of people that we were serving, wanted to keep serving them, and we were able to leverage the information that we had to be able to do that. So that is an organization-wide conflict. The next one I want to talk about is this regional-wide conflict where at this very same organization. Every year when I first started, they would distribute holiday funds. This might be something that your organization does as well. Normally it's for folks who are highly engaged and participating in the organization. And so again, this is kind of helping us think about service delivery. And so the conflict here was that historically the criteria was that it inadvertently, again, these are things that like people have ideas about what feels like a good idea and then may not think about the repercussions of that, right? And so the criteria for who would be receiving these holiday funds inadvertently rewarded members who were most active in our program, which isn't a bad thing. But when we think about who has the highest need, it's likely the people who may not be able to get the full benefits of the program. And so it feels a little weird. It felt a little weird to me to penalize people who might be in need when the whole thing is about people who are in need. And so, again, so just like that, the original criteria kind of rewarded these perfect program participants, right? And this was something that like a conflict that I saw, where I saw that like this criteria that historically was the case before I joined this organization was in conflict with the intended goal of these holiday funds to really be distributed to folks with the highest need. I think a lot of organizations struggle when they're trying to disperse funds, when they're trying to offer incentives like this and figuring out like what's an equitable criteria. And for me, for it being like just based on participation didn't seem all that right. And so through, again, multiple conversations through our regional team, we were able to come up with a criteria that like still benefited members who were most active and did not indirectly punish members who weren't the most active, right? And something that we saw was the members that weren't as active that received these holiday funds were like, oh shit, I'm so glad y'all are around. Why am I not participating? How can I get re-involved? And so actually that was we were able to get re-engaged with that, right? But again, that requires someone to notice like, oh, I think that this might be in conflict with like my personal values, organizational values. It might be in conflict with the intended goal, right? And so that was a regional wide conflict. I want to pause for a second if anyone has like comments or questions around some of the examples I had shared. And then I have one more. Yeah, and I want to again offer some of these examples because I think it's very easy. I'm thinking for the folks that I work with, all of my people, me included, have anxiety, right? And we're really good at thinking about worst case scenario. And so I hope that is you all are practicing how to tend to your nervous system, that you can use some of these stories to have a different story, right? There was like a TED talk I saw about the danger of one single story. And so I think about that with conflict, right? Like if we only have a negative story about conflict, it makes sense why we wouldn't engage with it. And so I hope some of these real life examples can help you kind of make sense and integrate that into some of your speaking up efforts. So, okay, the final example I wanted to share was something that happened very recently to me. This is a team-wide conflict at a much tinier scale, something that would be way more likely to happen in some of your smaller, like all staff team or program type meetings. And so the conflict here was around recalibrating expectations, around roles, and around getting on the same page around what collaboration looked like in a group of facilitators. And so the conflict here was that this was a tiny team who had so many quiet assumptions and expectations around one another that was not aligned, right? Everyone was like, oh, this is what I thought, and this is what I thought, and this is what I thought. But no one ever communicated that shit, which is not good. And so the result of that was that one person ended up feeling super resentful because they felt like they were putting in more work than other people. And I'm sure this is like a very common group project issue in places, in workplaces and in schooling. And so that person felt super resentful because they felt like they were putting more effort. And at the same time, they also didn't want to step on anyone's toes. And it's ironic that like we can have the intention of not trying to like do too much or not trying to like overpower anyone, but like some of that stuff still kind of happens. And I think that I would name that, like, again, those assumptions and those ideas around who's doing what and what does that mean, actually, those things weren't clearly named and they weren't negotiated, right? People were just operating in their own worlds and they're like, well, this is like verbatim of this person was like, well, we're all adults. right? And it made me think about how we say things around like this is common sense, but not everything is common, right? Like I am such a proponent of asking questions. Even if you think you understand something, ask more questions, right? Get crystal clear on what it is that someone is explaining to you, and even for yourself, like what do I even mean when I say such a thing? And so that took some time to kind of iron out. And I was like facilitating that conflict. And the first thing that we were able to do was to agree on what collaboration looked like. Right. And so everyone was able to chime in on like, here's how I saw my participation. Here's how I kind of felt your participation. So that no one person feels like they're doing too much and that other people are doing too little. Right. Like that kind of energy is not helpful. But unless we address it, that shit's just going to continue to fester. After we agreed on what collaboration was going to look like moving forward, then we had to agree on, okay, what are the ways we want to show up differently? Like next time we have some of these conversations, we have some of this, conflict rub. And so they agreed on, okay, I want to ask more questions. I want to make less assumptions of myself and one another. Okay, great. So we have some agreements. There's some next things that we are committing to. And then again, I just want to kind of underline this piece that sometimes folks are like, people will share something, and this happened during the meeting. It was like, oh, I understand what you're saying, and immediately like try to respond. Where I think we might not truly understand, right? And again, even if we think that we understand, we're filtering it through our own understanding, through our life experience. And I think those are just the moments that it's much better to kind of offer, like, I hear you saying this, and what that means to me is this other thing. Because I think again that would just benefit us so that we can be super clear. What I want to offer and kind of in summary is that I think the thread throughout all three examples, from the organization-wide one I offered, the regional, and then the smaller team one, is that when we refuse to see conflict is this purely sign of like disconnection, of danger and doubt, even though I fully understand those of us that are in multiple marginalized identities who are aware of the traumas that we carry. I can see why our approach to conflict is that way. But I think if we refuse that to be the only thing that can be true around conflict, then I think it makes space for us to do some of the things that I had shared in those examples, right? Like I think when we choose to see conflict as a way to deepen relationships we have with ourselves, with each other, with our values, to clarify, and with the world we want to be true, I think it gives us so much more openness and possibility for something else. And I want to credit, there's a quote that I recently learned about, I think last year, and I've been like just hammering it for anyone who will listen, from Malidoma Somé, that says, conflict is the spirit of the relationship asking itself to deepen, right? If we were to understand and where there's friction, where's there's tension, where's there's a difference, it's an opportunity for us to get closer, to get clearer, to fortify ourselves through the conflict. I just wonder how we might shift differently, how we might move differently. And so say that all to say, don't avoid conflict. Let's try to meet it. Let's tend to it. Let's nurture it. Let's transform it. We can try to use it for good. If all of those examples seem super far for you to be able to do right now, then I highly encourage you to start with just reclaiming your voice, being able to use that in the moment. And my resource for you, again, is the Nonprofit Disruptor Survivor Toolkit. It's my 5 tips on speaking up in the moment without all the second guessing, so you can finally get your liberatory ideas heard and implemented. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. Thanks.